Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Thursday, which means it's time for our weekly draft grades. Once a week, every single Thursday, I turn into Professor Bartner. I whip out the red pen. I don't have a red pen. I should get a red pen. And we grade the top 10 of a certain draft. Started in 2020. Last week, we did 2017. So now it is time for us to do the 2016 draft. Or the Matthews draft, where Matthews went first overall. And with Matthews, Laine, Dubois, Puljujarvi, Juolevi, Tkachuk, Keller, Nylander, Sergachev, and Jost. When looking at that, it is a wide variety of superstars, busts, pretty solid players. So we're going to have a wide array of grades with this. And starting up first, we got Austin Matthews. And I'm not going to lie, this was a tough grade for me because I hold first overall to such an esteem. You saw I gave Rasmus Dahlin an A-. I gave Jack Hughes only an A. I am going to go with an A+ for Austin Matthews, even though first overall, Austin Matthews isn't as great as Sidney Crosby, Mario Lemieux, Connor McDavid, Alexander Ovechkin, who went first overall as well. This guy is a top 3 goal scorer of all time at the end of the day. Yes, maybe he doesn't have the playoff success. Yes, maybe he doesn't have a Stanley Cup yet. Neither did Ovechkin until he was, in his early 30s. But he is a generational goal scoring talent. I wouldn't say he's an overall generational player, but he is one of the best goal scorers that we have ever seen. 3 Rocket Richards, 1 Hart Trophy, 69 goals last year, 2022. What do you have? 60 and 73. He is fantastic. And even in the COVID shortened season, he was well on pace for over 60 goals, I believe. He is fantastic. Yes, needs to do better in the playoffs. His legacy, maybe if they end up never winning a Stanley Cup or even making a conference finals, maybe he gets bumped down to an A. But when looking at it, I think he is by far I would say by far the most talented player in this draft. Another guy that we're going to get to, and there was another guy that went in the early 3rd round in Adam Fox. But I still think Austin Matthews is the best player in this draft. And when it's all said and done, if he can win a Stanley Cup, I don't think it's ridiculous to think that he can be a top 25 player of all time. So even though maybe he's not even in the top 5 all time, or definitely not the top 3 of all time first overall picks, I still think an A+ is deserved for Austin Matthews, considering he's starting his career at a historic goal scoring pace. I think he's ahead of Ovechkin in terms of first however many career games. He's fantastic. A+. Next up, Patrik Laine. I'm going to go with a B. Very weird when looking at a Patrik Laine because starting off his career, he was fantastic. He had 36 goals in 73 games as a rookie. Arguably could have won the Calder Trophy if he stayed healthy. He missed 9 games. Matthews scored 40. He was on pace for 40 as in Patrik Laine. Then 44 goals in his second season. It looked like he was going to be, him and Matthews were going to be the 2 best goal scorers after Ovechkin finally fell off. They were going to be competing for Rocket Richards. Never really happened. The following 3rd season, 30 goals, 20 assists, 50 points. He did find his game yet again in Columbus once he got traded. He had a season where he had 56 points in 56 games, 26 goals, 30 assists. You think that he's back on track? Even the following season after that, last year, 22 goals, 30 assists for 52 points in 53 games. He couldn't stay healthy, though. As you see, he only played 56 and 52 games. And then this year, back-to-back serious injuries. He got hurt to start the season after a couple games, then came back for a couple games, got hurt. Then he just completely shut it down. Unfortunately, he is in player assistance for, I don't want to speculate, but we can probably assume is something mental related. If he can get back on track, which we're all rooting for Patrik Laine. He's one of the most enjoyable, likable guys in the entire NHL. If he can get back on track, I'm confident that he can become a 35 goal, 35 assist guy. He's never going to be a complete 2-way player, even when he's scoring 44 goals. He was pretty bad defensively, but I think Patrik Laine still has the talent, and even his career thus far, again, he scored 44 in a season. He scored 36. His first 2 full seasons in Columbus, he was a point-per-game player. So as long as he comes back and plays good, didn't live up to expectations at second overall, but he's still a very, very highly skilled player. So I think a B is fine. Maybe if he never returns to form, a B-, but still, when he's on, he's a very good player. His bar is 30 goals, 40 assists, I would say at this point, if he's fully healthy and ready to go. Next up, Pierre-Luc Dubois, PL Dubois, as he goes by now. I don't think I'm ever going to actually refer to him as that. I'm going to go with the B-. So people might say that's generous considering he was pretty horrendous this year, 40 points in 82 games. But I still think he's going to bounce back. And there is not a decent drop-off, but there's a difference between second overall and third overall, especially in this draft when Patrik Laine was the consensus second overall. PLD was kind of jumped up. The guy at 4th overall was expected to go 3rd overall. But when looking at PLD, his basically outside of his rookie year, this year and the year that he got traded. He was a consistent 60-ish point, low-end number one center, more so a second-line center, and even last year, 63 points in 73 games. I think he's going to get back on track. Again, not a great pick, but not an extremely disappointing by any stretch. If he can continue to be a 60 to 65 point guy, it's disappointing for third overall. At third overall, you expect a first-line center. I'm not sure you expect a franchise superstar center, but you expect a first-line center. I think PLD is going to bounce back and have a solid career. He's never going to be worth $8.5 million, but I think he can be a very good second line center and get his career back on track and be like that player we saw in 2023 that had 63 points in 73 games, 65-ish point guy. He can do it. He can bounce back. I believe in him. Next up, Jesse Puljujarvi, pool party. When looking at Jesse Puljujarvi, I'm going to go with the D-. Never made it work in Edmonton, even though he was given a ton of opportunities in terms of playing a lot with McDavid and Draisaitl to a degree. He had one decent season where he had 36 points in 65 games, but again, that was playing like top 6 minutes in Edmonton. That's really not that impressive. He had solid underlying numbers, but I think a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that he was playing with those guys. He gets traded to Carolina, then he gets hurt. Now he is on Pittsburgh, was in their AHL, played pretty good in the AHL, got called up. He's nothing special at this point. He'll be lucky to be like a solid third line, two-way winger. So for that, I got to give him a D+. Very disappointing overall career thus far for Puljujarvi. Fifth overall, we're not really going to waste any time. Olli Juolevi, he gets an F. Yes, his development might have been botched a little bit. Yes, he had some injuries he had to deal with. But at the end of the day, three points total in 41 career NHL games. And at this point, he's back in Finland, probably not even doing that good in Finland, not to trash on the guy, but he's probably never to come back to the NHL. He's an easy F. It's pretty funny. They go Juolevi in fifth overall. Then the next year at fifth overall, they get Elias Pettersson. So it kind of canceled each other out. But Juolevi is one of the biggest busts of the last decade, bar none. You can make an argument that he's outside of like Nail Yakupov, maybe the second biggest bust. Next up, we got a fantastic player in Matthew Tkachuk. We go from Olli Juolevi to Matthew Tkachuk. He's got to get an A+, no doubt. When looking at him at sixth overall, you expect a high-level player, but you don't expect a guy that for the last 2 to 3 years has been a top 15 player in the entire NHL. Look at him to start his career right out of the gate. He was a very good first liner for the Calgary Flames. In 2022, really breaks out, has 42 goals, 62 assists for 104 points. But people kind of think, was he just Johnny Gaudreau's sidekick, the 1B to Johnny Gaudreau? How would he do away from Johnny Gaudreau? Gets traded to Florida, forces his way out to Florida. But when looking at it, first season in Florida, 40 goals, 69 assists, 109 points, third in the Hart Trophy, goes on to the playoffs, carries Florida offensively. Bobrovsky carried them in terms of not allowing a lot of goals, obviously, but offensively came up so clutch time and time again for the Florida Panthers. They make the Stanley Cup final. This year, a bit of a step back in terms of offensive regular season, 88 points. That's still very, very good, no duh, especially after the way that he started down the stretch. He was yet again like a 100-point pace guy back half the season. And then in this year's playoffs, he's playing fantastic yet again, and Florida is tied 2-2. They play tonight in like exactly an hour. So he's a top 8 to 15 guy. I think that's pretty safe to say at sixth overall. He's easily worth an A+, no doubt. Seventh overall, Clayton Keller. I am going to go with an A. I don't think that he's quite a superstar to warrant that A+, but still, he is the ideal skilled winger in the modern NHL. When looking at it last year, he had 37 goals, 40. Well, let's run it back. First off, rookie year, 65 points was fantastic. I think he was a Calder finalist. Then for a couple of years, doesn't put up that flashy of numbers, but it's because Arizona didn't have any talent around him. He never really had a number one center, even though I like Nick Schmaltz, not a number one center. But despite that, last year, 37 goals, 49 assists, 86 points, really breaks out and just like, I'm on an island here, and yet I'm still producing like an all NHL level player. This year, yet again, very productive, 33 goals, 43 assists, 76 points. If either Arizona or Utah at this point, if Utah brings in some talent or Logan Cooley really develops, I think Clayton Keller can break the 90-point mark. I mean, he was close last year of doing it, but he is fantastic. Wouldn't shock me if one season he goes for 40 and 50 if Utah actually becomes a playoff team. So at seventh overall, I got to go with an A for Clayton Keller. Next up, we got Alex Nylander, and he had a pretty unfortunate start to his career. It was starting looking like that he was going to break out in terms of the fact that he had 26 points in 55 games during the 2019-2020 season. Finally really got a full NHL run. Looked like he was going to get minutes on the Chicago Blackhawks. Then he tears his MCL before the shortened 2021 season. Doesn't make it back to the NHL until 2022-2023. But this year for the Columbus Blue Jackets, once he was traded from Pittsburgh to Columbus, he was extremely productive. 11 goals, 4 assists, 15 points in 23 games, playing 16.46 a night for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And yes, he did score 11 goals in 23 games, but it's not even like he shot 30% like you would expect. No, he only shot a solid, he's not going to maintain this, but he still shot 17%. So going forward, they gave him, Pascal Vincent clearly likes him to a degree. He might be playing over goddamn Adam Fantilli next year. So in looking at Nylander before this season, probably would have been an F, considering he never really made it back after that injury. But now he has some hope in Columbus. Clearly Columbus trusts him. Still, I'm going to give him a D. Like, that's not that impressive of a grade, but there's a decent chance that he can turn into an okay middle six forward in Columbus. 9th overall. It's a weird one, obviously, because Sergachev was not selected by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was selected by the Montreal Canadiens and then famously traded for Jonathan Drouin. But I'm just going to go on based on the draft position and the player that he became. And for that, I got to give him an A. When looking at him in 2021, 2022, he was a legit, probably could have been a number one defenseman on other teams, but they just had Victor Hedman, but he was still a solid around 40-ish point pace guy. Then in 2023, he finally fully breaks out. It's basically a 1A, 1B in Tampa Bay last year. Sergachev has 64 points, plays 23.49 a night, really established him, gets some Norris votes, really enters top 20 defensemen in the entire NHL conversations. Unfortunately, this year, he was playing, again, very solid, 19 points in 34 games, but then he shatters his leg. If he can bounce back, if he can come back and be fully himself, fully his 2023 form, I think that he's going to be the number one defenseman on this team going forward. Victor Hedman has started to fall off a bit, especially offensively, he's still great, but defensively, it has not been the same. Sergachev is eventually going to be given the keys to the franchise in terms of the blue line. So Sergachev gets an A. And then lastly, Tyson Jost, D-. When looking at it, he never really worked in Colorado. He was like scoring in the mid-20s. He got traded in the 2022 season to Minnesota, so he didn't even win the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. That's got to stink. Wasn't good for the Minnesota Wild at all. Gets traded to Buffalo. And then this most recent season had 6 points in 42 games. So he is a textbook bust. You can't really bust that much at 10th overall, considering there's not that high of expectations. But I'm going to go with a D-. Can't really fully give him an F because he has played 456 NHL games, racked up 140 points. He's not like an old Juolevi, but a very, very, very disappointing career for Tyson Jost, unfortunately. Hopefully he finds his game somewhere, but I got to go with a D-. So here are the full grades. Matthews, A+, Laine, A, B+, Dubois, B-. You know it. You see it. Why am I repeating it? Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'll be seeing the next one.